Good to go. My name's Kenneth COF. Yeah, that's actually my last name. No, I don't stalk people, I promise. I'm kind of talking about a boring topic, so I'll try to make it as not boring as possible. So I'm going to kind of put my statistics and everything we can kind of understand. So I'm going to be talking about nuclear energy and why it's kind of our future of clean, sustainable energy. So we all love our phones, like she was talking about. We all love our phones. But only when we charge our phones every single night, I'm assuming we all do, only 20% of that power is coming from nuclear energy, and the other almost 80% is coming from coal and oil and stuff like that. And it's not clean. You can thank the smog for that. So as of right now, 67% of our electricity is coming from coal and oil. But there's a lot cleaner solution, and that's nuclear power. The first topic, my proposition is that nuclear power is the future of clean, sustainable energy. So my first point is that other energy sources aren't viable in the long run. We're running out of coal very quickly, and we're running out of oil very quickly. Our coal reserves right now will only last us about 260 years, which sounds like a lot, but with population increase and new energy demands, it's probably only around 150 or 100. Oil, the US only has about 5 years in reserve, so not including, that's only for energy. If we account everybody driving, it's probably only 2 or 3. And that makes us really, really dependent on other countries for our oil. So in a quote by Gwyneth Cravens for the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, basically she says that she hasn't seen any other technology with that has what nuclear power has. She says wind and solar are really weak and intermittent, which is true. It's not always sunny and it's not always windy. So my second point is to combat new energy demands and fears of climate change. Governments around the world are moving towards more nuclear power. Right now, China is embarking upon a huge increase in nuclear capacity to, 58 gigawatts by 2020. That's probably enough every day to power the equivalent of 40 million homes without burning any oil or coal. And quoting an article from the Journal of Risk Research, India has the most technically ambitious and innovative nuclear energy program in the world. And global appreciation for India's nuclear program is not confined to their impeccable non-proliferation goals. Non-proliferation being they're not using it for weapons, only for power. My last point basically being is that nuclear power is more reliable and produces more energy and uses less land than other forms of sustainable energy. On average, a nuclear power plant will only use about 1.7 square miles for a power plant, while a wind farm will take up almost 200 square miles. That's land we can't use for housing or businesses or anything like that. So I guess just going over my main points is that where nuclear power can actually last longer than all of our other sustainable forms of energy, you can run a power plant for 6 years without needing to be refueled, while you're refueling a coal power plant every month or so, and it burns about 140 million pounds of coal every year. So secondly, a lot of governments are moving more towards nuclear power because it's so clean and safe. A lot of people don't think it's that safe, but there's really no evidence to suggest that it's not. And then finally, it's just more reliable and produces more power than anything else we have. That's it.
All right, Kenneth, your proposition is a little deeper into the speech than I think you might want it to be. You get a lot of background information. It sounds like you're giving us an informative speech at the beginning. I thought that you had the proposition right early on, and then it turns out that that's not it. When you got to the proposition, I thought that it was actually clearly identified, and it was written appropriately for the topic that you're talking about, but like I said, it feels like it got a little buried. And there is no preview of what the supporting structure is going to be, so I'm not exactly sure where you're going to go in developing that argument. Now, you do signpost the secondary points pretty well. I think that you need more data on a couple of the points, but I think you're on the right track. The argument that says other resources are not viable in the long term, you had some data about coal, you had some data about oil, you estimated the times or the amount of years that they would last. I didn't really hear any source citations on those kinds of things, and some of it's predicated on usage rates. I'm not sure that you've got the same data that's being, the most contemporary data on a couple of these points. So that's why you want to be able to give us source citations on that. Later on, you criticize wind energy, but I assume that there are other alternative energy sources that might be competing. Apparently, they don't contribute substantially to the grid right now, so I think that's one of those things that ought to be in that part of the argument when you're talking about how other sources are not particularly viable. The notion that other countries are moving to nuclear programs, I guess the argument here is that if other countries feel that it is safe and productive to do so, that we're missing out on something. If you were making an argument about what U.S. policy ought to be in regard to that, and since you talked about our coal reserves and our oil reserves, that's kind of the inference that I'm making here, then we ought to get some demonstration about how efficient those things are. The closest you get to something like that is that the Chinese will probably have a certain number of gigawatts available by 2020. So I think that's pretty good information, but that doesn't tell me how many plants they have to build and what the resources are and any of those kinds of things. And I don't know what their alternative energies are, how it competes economically, for instance. I think that should be part of the argument here. The Indian example, well, it sounds like very general positive information about India's nuclear program. I didn't hear anything that was specific about sustainability or long-term energy needs, so I thought that was not as applicable to the argument as it might have been. I did think that the comparison that you made on the wind farms made sense. Again, I think that probably should have been on that first point, where you're talking about the alternatives not working very effectively. And then when you're talking about the effectiveness of nuclear plants, there's only a little bit of discussion about how effective they are. They only need to be refueled every 6 years. But what does it take to refuel them? Do we have adequate resources, uranium resources, for instance? And there's no data, no source on that either. So you need to make sure that you're citing your sources in the presentation as well. And then we got our first Porky Pig exit. Yeah, that's it. So let's look for something a little bit more graceful than that.